Snow fell in heavy, wet clumps, bending the pine branches until they groaned. Sergeant Elias Kappel trudged through the Ardennes forest, each step sinking ankle-deep in the churned-up path his men had made ahead of him. Breath steamed from their mouths in ragged bursts. They hadn't spoken in over an hour. Orders had been simple: fall back, regroup, wait for further instruction. But the forest felt wrong. The wind didn't whistle, it whispered, a thin, papery hiss as though the trees were leaning together to share secrets. Private Heine glanced back, his young face pale under the shadow of his helmet. Elias gave a nod he didn't feel. The first shell fell somewhere to their left, far off. A second, closer. Then a scream of air and a flash that swallowed everything. Elias never remembered hitting the ground. Just the whiteness. And then, cold. He opened his eyes to a dim yellow light and a ceiling that curved overhead like the inside of a barrel. Droplets slid slowly along the metal and fell with patient, echoing plinks. He was lying on a grate. The steel was slick beneath him. His cheek was wet. No wind, no voices, no forest. He pushed himself up, his knees trembling. The room was narrow, more of a passage, the walls bending inward in a way that made him feel small, boxed in. They were slick with condensation, rivets rusted, seams dark with grime. His rifle was gone. His pack was gone. His bayonet still hung at his belt, its grip worn smooth, the blade spotted with old brown stains. The silence was so deep, it felt thick in his ears. And then, scrape, drag, scrape. Somewhere inside the wall to his right, something was moving. Elias held his breath and pressed a palm to the cold wall. The sound was faint at first, almost like something sliding through water. Then the dragging came again, closer now. A slow, deliberate wait, as if whatever it was didn't care about being heard. The steel was trembling beneath his touch. He pulled his hand back and wiped it on his coat. The dampness clung like oil. Ahead, the corridor stretched maybe 20 paces before ending at a heavy door left slightly open. Its hinges sagged, rust flaking like dried blood. Above it, faded letters curved in a language that looked half familiar. Cyrillic, yes, but the characters were warped, elongated in unnatural ways. Some strokes ended in barbs, others curled like hooks. He moved toward it, boots ringing softly on the grate. Every step sounded too loud. The corridor air was cold enough to sting his lungs. With each breath, a small ghost of vapor followed him, vanishing almost instantly. When he reached the door, the smell hit him. Not the clean, sharp rot of a dead animal in the snow. This was sweeter, cloying, the way fruit smells when it collapses into itself. Water pooled beneath the door, black as tar in the low light. It didn't ripple. He pushed on the edge of the steel. The door groaned, the sound echoing far too long in the space beyond. The chamber was larger, maybe twice the width of the corridor, its ceiling lost in shadow. Thick pipes crossed above, dripping steadily into the water gathered in shallow depressions on the floor. The walls bore strange dents, as if something inside had pressed outward, warping the metal, but never breaking through. Elias stepped inside. The scrape came again, this time from behind one of the dented walls. He turned slowly, bayonet in hand, his pulse hammering in his ears. The sound stopped. In the silence, a single drop of water fell into the pool at his feet, sending a ring across its surface. Then the ring broke. The reflection that rose in the black water wasn't his. The face was wrong. Skin stretched too tightly over bone. The hollows where eyes should have been smooth and pale. The mouth cinched shut with thin black wires that seemed to pulse faintly. Elias froze. His own breath sounded foreign, ragged. The reflection twitched once, then vanished. He looked up fast. The space above was empty. Pipes, shadow, nothing else. But the reflection had been above him, not in front. Somewhere behind him, something wet shifted. He turned. The door he'd come through was gone. In its place was darkness, thick and faintly moving, like the surface of water seen from beneath. Elias stared at the black mass where the doorway had been. It wasn't shadow. Shadows didn't move. This swelled and contracted slowly, the way a lung might, but without rhythm. When he stepped closer, it seemed to retreat, yet the air before it pressed back at him with invisible weight. He took a step back. The thing settled in place again, faint ripples moving across its surface as though stirred from the other side. The scraping began again. Not just one source now, several. A chorus of small drags and taps, each at a slightly different pitch, as though claws were running along metal in uneven patterns. Some sounded above him, some in the walls, some far below. He turned away from the breathing blackness and scanned the chamber. A narrow corridor branched off to the left, the light above it sputtering every few seconds. The air there was colder still. He moved toward it, bayonet low, boots splashing quietly in shallow puddles. The water here tasted of rust just from the smell. The corridor opened into another room, this one filled with debris, objects scattered across the floor in strange clusters. A cracked helmet, dented inward as though crushed in a fist. A boot with the laces tied neatly, but no foot inside. A wristwatch with no hands, its glass face fogged. He crouched by the watch. Inside, instead of gears, something pale and wet shifted, withdrawing from the light like a worm disturbed under a stone. Elias dropped it. The tap it made on the grate echoed far too long. Something rustled behind him. He turned sharply, but the corridor was empty. The smell here was stronger, sickly sweet, mixed with the faint metallic tang of blood. It clung to the back of his throat. One wall bore another patch of writing, same bent Cyrillic shapes as before, but these seemed fresh, scratched into the steel with something sharp. The grooves were dark, and when he leaned close, he saw moisture welling from them, as though the wall itself was bleeding. A soft thump sounded in the darkness ahead, then another, closer. He stepped back, and his boot touched something soft. A coat. Thick wool, similar to his own, folded neatly on the floor. The collar was turned up, but beneath it, where a head should have been, the fabric rose and fell faintly, as though something inside was breathing. Elias's hand went to the coat without thinking, fingers brushing the damp wool. It was warm. Too warm. Something shifted inside it. Slow, deliberate, like muscle rolling beneath skin. He yanked his hand back. The coat deflated slightly, air hissing out as though it had exhaled. The thumps came again, quicker now, and from more than one direction. His pulse climbed with them. He backed into the corridor and moved fast, boots splashing through the shallow water. The sound of his footsteps was joined almost immediately by others. Wet, dragging steps that didn't quite match his rhythm. The corridor branched unexpectedly. He didn't remember seeing it before. He turned right, then left, trying to keep the light in sight. But each turn brought him to more of the same: steel ribs, dripping rivets, that same sickly, sweet stench. It was as though the place had folded in on itself, corridors looping back in ways they shouldn't. The scraping was all around now, inside the walls, above the pipes, beneath the grating. Every so often it stopped for a heartbeat, as if whatever was making it was listening for him. He burst into another chamber, this one taller, with walls that seemed to curve inwards and upwards like the inside of a great throat. In the center was a pit, ringed with the same bent letter markings as the doors. Steam rose from it in thin, shivering strands. He approached. The pit was filled not with water, but something darker, thicker, slowly churning, as though stirred from below. The air in the chamber shifted. The shadows on the far wall moved. From the darkness above the pit, something descended. Not a figure, not an animal. It was a mass of pale, glistening limbs, too many to count, each joint bending the wrong way. The sound it made wasn't a growl or a hiss. It was the straining creak of metal under weight, the whisper of something speaking through water. One limb touched the floor. The steel where it landed dented. Elias stepped back, bayonet raised, but the walls behind him were already closing in. Metal groaning, as though the bunker itself was tightening around them both. The wires in the thing's mouth, if it had a mouth, began to hum, a high, sharp note that rattled in his skull. The sound carried words, though not in any language he knew. And yet, he understood. You woke where you do not belong. The limbs surged forward. The first limb struck the floor with a wet, metallic clang, denting the grate. Elias staggered back, bayonet trembling in his grip. The thing pulled more of itself into the light, a heaving lattice of pale limbs, each ending in a hand too long and too narrow, nails clicking as they flexed. In its center, where a head should be, a mass of stretched flesh bulged, stitched in spirals with black wire that pulsed faintly, like veins carrying light instead of blood. The hum grew sharper, drilling into his skull. His knees buckled. The walls around the pit swelled and shrank like the inside of a lung. Another limb shot forward, smashing into the floor where he had stood. Steel screamed and warped. Elias ran. The corridor ahead twisted violently, pipes bulging from the walls as though something inside them was trying to burst free. The grating under his boots was slick, buckling in places. Every corner he turned felt wrong. Hallways too short, too long, curving subtly away from where they should go. Behind him, the limbs scraped and slammed against the metal, a rhythm that grew faster as it gained on him. He hit a junction and skidded, catching himself on the wall. His palm came away wet, not with water, but something thicker and warm. The steel under his hand pulsed faintly, as if it had a heartbeat. A bulkhead door ahead hung half open. He pushed into it, shoving against the rusted hinge until it screamed and gave. The room beyond was low, claustrophobic, stacked with old crates and rotting canvas sacks. The smell was unbearable, sweet, choking, heavy with decay. Something inside the crates moved. He didn't look. He scrambled over them, slipping on wet wood, forcing his way into another narrow passage. His lungs burned. The hum of the thing was in his bones now. He could feel it pulling at him, tugging like a hook behind his ribs. Up ahead, light. He ran harder, boots slamming into the grating, bayonet clattering against his thigh. The light grew brighter, cleaner, whiter than the sickly amber that lit the bunker. The hum behind him sharpened into a scream, not human, not animal, but the sound of a steel beam tearing apart under strain. The passage shuddered violently, and the walls began to fold inward. Elias threw himself toward the light, ducking under a hanging pipe that snapped like bone as he passed. One of the thing's limbs shot forward, clawing along the wall beside him, nails gouging deep into the steel. It almost caught his coat, but he wrenched free and dove through the gap. Snow. Elias landed face first in it, the cold burning his skin. The air outside was sharp, alive with the distant crack of gunfire. Pines rose all around him, heavy with fresh snow, their branches whispering in the wind. Somewhere far off, artillery thumped, shaking the ground. He scrambled to his feet, spinning toward the opening he'd come through. It was gone. Just a ridge of earth and ice, smooth and unbroken, as if the bunker had never existed. Elias stood there, chest heaving, steam rising from his body into the frozen air. His bayonet hung limp in his grip. He was shaking, but not from the cold. A shout carried through the trees, German, sharp and close. He dropped to his knees in the snow, breath ragged, staring at the spot where the opening had been. The war was still here. The gunfire still here. The cold still here. Somewhere deep beneath him, far below the snow and soil, the scraping began again. It was faint, but it was getting closer. Elias closed his eyes. There was no going back. There was nowhere to go at all. The war would take him if the bunker didn't, and he didn't know which would be worse.